Hello, my name is Andy Athanor, and welcome to the very first session or the office hour talking about integrations within SuccessFactors. As I mentioned, my name is Andy Athanor, and I'm part of the product management team over at SuccessFactors. And my primary role on this team is to help partners with their integrations and integration issues and questions. And what we will be doing today is an overview of the sort of the integrations that are available right now within SuccessFactors. And in future sessions, of course, we will start concentrating upon specific topics. And I have not shared my screen, so I will start doing that. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Michael?
Yes, it's showing now.
Okay. Now, like I mentioned, this is not going to be very heavy on the specific integrations. It's more of an overview, but let's go through that. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about how does one go about integrating with SuccessFactors, and how do you go about classifying the integrations. Now, before we sort of jump in, any questions that I can answer first?
So this is Yun from Coursera. Can I ask, are you going to talk about OCN today?
No, definitely not OCN today. That is on the roadmap. That should happen within a few weeks, but not today. Definitely not today.
And so, yeah, so basically I'm having some questions about OAuth. So is the OAuth of SF, the general SF integration, the same as OCN?
No, the learning management system has a different way of approaching the integrations. And like I said, we will approach that in a future session, not today.
Sorry, one more question. So will SF integration include anything about the connectors?
Not right now. Yes, that is definitely on the plans, but not right now, because we need to get. I will try to get some experts from the learning management side to answer these questions about connectors, but not today.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions? All right, let's jump right in. Okay, this is a no-brainer, but again, because this is part of a larger deck, I thought I'll include this. We have why integrations is obvious. You guys are all partners, and you will fit into one of these areas on the third-party cloud solutions. Now, just to clarify, when we talk about SAP data centers, you should be aware that we have at least about 19 different data centers as of now, production, and a few of them in sales demo. And sales demo are the environments are the ones that you guys are accessing, mostly in Ashburn or Chandler, Arizona. And there might be a few on DC2. DC2 is Europe. I don't know if we have any current partners on those data centers. But anyway, SuccessFactors is, as you well know, it's an HRIS system. And for you guys, it is important to know that it comes in two different flavors. One that is called Employee Central, which is what many of you will be integrating with. And one flavor is purely talent management, where SuccessFactors is not the HRIS system. It just does the talent management piece of it. Talent management typically deals with things like sourcing. That is, how do you recruit somebody? Recruiting is a part of that. Then, as you think about an employee's life cycle, there are several different things that happen. You have recruiting, you have onboarding, And then you have performance management, goal management, compensation planning, succession planning, learning management, and all those sort of form the talent management portion of SuccessFactors. And Employee Central is the in the cloud HRIS system, which happens to be the system of record. So when you're talking about integrations, we will have SuccessFactors as the system of record. And in many cases, in most cases, you will have outbound integrations from SuccessFactors into third-party systems. Now, this is a rather interesting, not terribly data heavy, but just a listing of all the modules or the integration use cases, if you will, sorted by decreasing order of demand, if you will. So at the top of the list is, of course, Employee Central. I mentioned briefly that it is the system of record in the cloud. So there's a lot of need to feed the data into downstream third-party systems. Recruiting management, of course, many of you guys are working with that. Many of the partners are currently working on two specific aspects of recruiting management. One which is assessments, the other one is background checks. And then, of course, the other modules are simply listed there for future reference. Maybe there is a need to integrate in the future. And depending on what kind of partners we have, we will start seeing activity in the other areas. Now, integration, we basically have two main types. One is a file-based integration. That is simply CSV or .txt files extracted out of SuccessFactors or into SuccessFactors without any transformation. In other words, raw data coming out of SuccessFactors or raw data coming in from an external system. Then, of course, you have web services where you can start thinking about real-time or near real-time integrations. When somebody talks about file-based CSVs, those are almost always batch processes. Web services, a tendency is to have it closer to near real-time as possible. And in some cases, you will actually have real-time integration. Now, all of these can be serviced or leveraged via different integration by integration platform or middleware. We'll get into that in a little bit. All right. Now, I sort of briefly touched upon the file-based integrations. These are integration. It's really not accurate to call them integration. They're more like data extraction or import. But nevertheless, they do perform the same functions. So in SuccessFactors, we have several areas where you can import and export data. For example, the user information. You can import it through admin tools. You can import it through provisioning by a tool that's called Process Scheduler. Now, we also have a legacy way of reporting, which is called ad hoc reports. And that will you can also extract, well, you can extract data using ad hoc. And this early on, up until about I would say roughly until about 4 years ago, ad hoc reports was about the only way to get data out of Employee Central in SuccessFactors. And so if you were to go back and look at the old middleware integrations that have been built, either using Boomi or SAP Cloud integration, many of them used ad hoc reports. Anyway, so those are all the ones that are in blue. Let me just pause here for a second. This might be a little too much of information. Any questions so far?
Can I ask, so how does the jobs work? So is that a scheduled job that we can upload files to either from or to SF?
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yeah. So this is we have what is called we have the backend system which is called provisioning, and under that we have some features which is called process scheduler, and that is a way to set up import or export jobs using SFTP, right? We can either deliver the data to your own SFTP server, or you might use the one that has been set up for your customer or your instance. It'll work either way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what data can we import or export from those jobs, like from those SFTP?
It's a long list of things, but let me just log in and I'll show you. One brief moment. So this screen should be very familiar to you. This is where you log into the backend. And I'm going to use my own sales demo instance that I have. And I briefly mentioned you will be logging in using your email address and the password that you have set up for this. Now here we have something called as manage scheduled jobs or monitor jobs. And there's a drop down here. You can see the long list of things that you can import and export.
Okay, and so basically I set up a SFTP server and create a job from here and then add some schedules. And so every day we'll run the job.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay.
Now, this is particularly relevant for LMS. It is usually employee export. I may not have a job here, but I just have an execution. Now, this one, I've done a one-time export. I've not really scheduled it, but you can look at the job here. One second, it takes a little bit of time to come up. Sales demo instances are not the fastest ones in the world, but okay. So here you can see it's called the employee export for LMS. This is valid users, and there's an SFTP server, internal SFTP server. And there's an, naturally when you have SFTP, you have the login username and password, and then use the SFTP protocol. And then, of course, you have the standard things like what do you want to call the file, where do you want to place it, different kinds of date format for the file. Sorry, I closed it accidentally. And if you want the file to be encrypted, not encrypted, and then there's some occurrence here. This is just a sample. And many customers will probably be using employee import, the most common use case. I don't have a job set up, but I can if I want to. I can just call it employee import. Anyway, we can touch upon this at a later point, because if I spend time on this, we will pretty much run through the entire hour.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, just one quick question. So is this job support like importing courses and importing programs or catalogs or curriculums to the LMS?
No, this is specific to SuccessFactors or BizX. It's a core
So
module.
it's okay, I see.
Yeah. So, but the main thing that LMS the implementers will be interested in is the users and the synchronization from between BizX and LMS. So that's where the synchronization happens. But course imports, learning catalogs, yes, you can import them, but I have not done that because I have not set up my instance for LMS. But I
Having
will.
said that, sorry,
Go
Andy,
ahead.
this is Vivek, just to chime in. So just to kind of talk about the curricular import, I think that's where you're trying to sort of get your questions answered. Let's take that offline. There is a different set of import and export process that we work specifically for the curricular import. And we are happy to sort of discuss this offline. There is certain steps that you need to go through in order to complete that, which is somewhat outside of what Andy is discussing, but certainly doable, of course.
Okay, so do you mind send me a document about how to set up like sync of curriculum and programs and courses?
Yeah, that's the thing that we're talking to Jen about right now. So I know Michael has been working with Jen, and I think what the next step on that is for us to get with your team and set up a session so that we can line up the appropriate resources on our side that can help you with that specific task. It's something that we don't do very often, which is why it's a professional services engagement that we need to do. But let's take that offline. We're happy to sort of address that.
Okay, great.
Okay, alrighty, great, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Vivek. So I kind of touched upon the import and export of jobs using Process Scheduler. You can also do that in admin tools. It's also mentioned here. Touch briefly upon the ad hoc reports. In terms of the UI for all of this, we can get into that in a later session, or you can play around with your own sales demo instances. The documentation is widely available. If you have some specific questions regarding something, please feel free to post a question on Jam site. We do have a Jam site available for you guys to ask questions. So please go ahead and post a question that we'll try to answer them as quickly as we can. Now, we talked to the stuff in the blue is mostly just plain CSV files. We can also use Integration Center for that. We'll talk about Integration Center in a bit. It's a little more sophisticated than simply saying that it's available for exporting CSV files. We'll get to that in a minute. But the stuff in the yellow, now we'll discuss that in one of the other slides. But point being that we have different integration platforms or middleware, if you want to call it. The new one, of course, not you, but it's come from the SAP's. Whoops, sorry. Okay. So this the first one that's listed here, it's called SAP Cloud Platform / SAP Cloud Integration. It was formerly known as HCI. For HANA Cloud Integration. There's been a lot of rebranding, so you will very often see those terms used interchangeably, HCI and SAP Cloud Integration. Then, of course, we have the legacy process integration tool from SAP, which is typically used to exchange or facilitate integration between cloud and any SAP on-prem or any third-party system, basically, with an SAP on-prem system. And then, of course, we have Dell Boomi, which some of you might be familiar. And Dell Boomi, they have been working with SuccessFactors for nearly 7 or 8 years that I can remember. And you can also implement your integrations using that. Now, I don't want to touch too much on the middleware integration because it can get pretty complex and involved. Let's just move to the next. Okay, so we talked briefly about, I mentioned briefly about importing and exporting data. Here is a surface screenshot in admin tools where you can import employee information. So typically you would use the basic import. And there are some options on what you can do once you do the import. You can look at it in your own instances, just play around with it, and a lot of it should be pretty self-explanatory. Some of these flags that you have that can get pretty complex, or rather interesting to look at, but from a partner perspective, you may not encounter those. Those will be mostly for customers to adjust those settings. Now, I mentioned Integration Center. Now, this is one of the Integration Center used to be called a Simple Integration Builder. The name Simple is the name Simple is used everywhere. Of course, being technical people, we all know simple is not always simple. But anyway, be that as it may, Integration Center is something that has been around for about the last year and a half, and that is that's a good way to think about building an integration going forward. There's several advantages to it. I will not get into the detail. I'll just show you some screenshots here. And essentially, the main notion being that if you want to get data out of SuccessFactors, and if the data is exposed via OData API, you can leverage Integration Center to take the data, transform it, massage it any way that makes sense, and deliver it to an external system, whether it is a SFTP or whether it's a sort of a listener endpoint. All those things can be done, and of course, this allows you to also encrypt the data if you want to. So again, this is a little bit of a marketing speak, I suppose, but it is worthwhile noting that it is meant for a non-technical user. Although in my experience working with this, you definitely need to know what data you're trying to extract, because it can be pretty complex or it can be pretty simple depending on the use case. But the main point being that you don't need any middleware to build it. And the nice thing about this one is SAP/SuccessFactors is constantly building or working on making more and more templates available for end customers and partners alike. So think of it as a way to speed up your development process. And once you have a template or you download one of the little templates from the catalog, it's a simple matter of modifying the catalog and then speeding up your integration process using the Integration Center. So again, I have worked with both Integration Center and Booming. And what I've noticed is, again, this is my personal experience. If you start looking at really complex exports, the development time with the Integration Center is roughly about 30 to 40% as compared to using a middleware. That is not the gospel truth. It's just my personal experience. Some people, of course, as the saying goes, your mileage may vary. Let me pause here for a brief moment while, we can all read this slide. Let me pause here and take some questions. Well, looks like I'm doing a fantastic job, or a terrible one at that. But be that as it may, I mentioned previously that the Integration Center leverages the OData API, and OData API is the API standard that SAP and SuccessFactors have sort of agreed upon. That is going to be the way forward. There are several advantages to using OData API as compared to the legacy SF API. I will not get too much into detail about that, but be that as it may, Integration Center, as you can see here, the second bullet point, it says you can have time and value-based filters. For example, if you're doing an export from, let us say, from process scheduler, you want to extract the user information, you put it all in one little file, send it out. But let us say you want to only filter the users based on a particular filter. Your department equal to sales, location equal to Boston, whatever. And that is just a value-based filter. And one of the advantages of using something like an integration center is you do have the powerful capabilities of putting time-based filters. A very common use case in middleware when you're using HCI or Boomi is you will very often see that get me all the data since the last successful run. Now, that is a very, very simple English sentence, but it has a lot of implications in terms of how you can get the data or what kind of data you can get, and proves very, very powerful. And we can get into that at a later stage. But for now, it's enough to sort of understand that you can put different kinds of filters on the when you try to export data. And you can, of course, you can also transform the data any way you want. A good example of that is from the user entity. You're pulling in the first name of a user. Again, as always, every one of these demos, we will always touch upon the easiest examples. When you actually get into doing the development using Integration Center, you will run into more and more complex scenarios. So example, you have a first name, it is stored as Andy, right? First letter is capitalized, all others are lowercase, and for some reason you want to export the data all uppercase. Yes, you can do that. And imagine that you want to also concatenate the last name, put a space in it, make it all uppercase, and then you want to make it a fixed length, or you want to make it position based. You can do several sorts of things with the Integration Center. It all depends upon the kind of use case that you have. Now, I've also, the fourth bullet point talks about value lookup tables. Again, very common scenario when you're using middleware, which is you want to use lookup tables for some static data. A good example of that will be, let's say your position ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the position code or the position description is something else, which says senior technical director something. Now, all those values are typically not, they are stored in pick list tables. Pick list is the way that SuccessFactors manages the lookup table, and the Integration Center will let you pick the right pick list value that you want. Now, if you have worked with any kind of middleware, you will know that's a pretty complex thing to solve, but it is pretty easy once you know how to do it. And the Integration Center, it becomes a very powerful way to sort of build your integrations out quickly. Now, the fifth bullet point talks about we can send the file over to an SFTP server. And much like any other SFTP mechanism, you can schedule it, you can encrypt it, you can put it into specific folders, have some file naming patterns. For example, always add today's date and time, if required, to a scheduled file. And the sixth bullet point talks about intelligent services. Intelligent services is a new, rather new event notification framework that's been developed, and it's being developed for various different use cases within SuccessFactors. Now, this becomes very useful when you're trying to build integrations, essentially a good example of that, if you think about Employee Central, is I have my manager has changed. I'm an employee, I'm transferred to a different manager, and then I have a new manager. Now, there can be several downstream systems that might want to react based on the assignment of the new manager, and the event notification mechanism provides a way for you to react to that. And I'm not directly mentioned it here, but event notifications is a slightly different subsystem where you simply say that this is the listener, this is the event, and my destination. Who should be listening to that particular event? Intelligence services, integration centers able to consume those intelligence services also. And so that acts like a real-time integration rather than a scheduled one. And there's several different things you can typically do. For instance, if going back to the previous example, change in the manager, you might be interested in knowing what is the first name and the last name of the new manager. Or you might want to know what is the location of the new manager. You can get all this information from Integration Center. You can massage the payload as you need and deliver the data to a third-party system, whether it's SFTP or REST. You can deliver a file using a typical file extension, .csv, .txt, XML, JSON, and so on. And of course, we can always encrypt the files. And of course, because the Integration Center has a separate tab to monitor the messages, you can monitor all the jobs that have been sent through the Integration Center. And by the way, this can also be looked at in the backend. In case there is some sort of a doubt, you can always go back and look at the backend. For people who have access to the backend, you can monitor the integration in two different ways. These are just a couple of screenshots. Once you have Integration Center enabled in your system, you can play around with it. I think there are a couple of samples that come along with your sales demo instance. You're most welcome to modify those sort of seed integrations, or copy them, modify them to your heart's content, and play around with different things, like how do I add different fields, how do I put filters into it, what kind of destination I want to set it to, run it, schedule it, and all that fun stuff. So we talked about, mentioned a little bit about Integration Center, and I also mentioned the Integration Center leverages OData. And we have two different sets of APIs. One that's a SOAP-based API, which is called SF API, which was the legacy one. It's been around for about 7 years or so, 7-8 years. And OData, of course, is the preferred and the newer way of doing things. There are some technical differences between the two. If you want, we can get into a discussion of the finer aspects at a later session. But for now, it is enough to know that OData is the preferred way of integrating going forward, or rather the web services that we prefer that you use. It may not always be true, but just keep that in mind. Now, because we have an API, you need to know what is happening behind the scenes when you make an API call. And we do, of course, have what is called the OData API audit log. The screen here is, for some reason, my volume is working. Oops, sorry. My bad. One sec, guys. I apologize. All right. So any questions so far? I think I put everyone to sleep by now. All right.
Not at all.
Oh, excellent. Thanks, Vivek. All right. Integration is a pretty large topic. And as partners, that's why you guys are here, to leverage those kinds of things and then build things. What is listed here is different kinds of ways of integrating, starting from the left to the right, starting the least flexible and the simplest ones to most flexible on the rightmost column, and more complex. Now we have packaged integrations. If you have heard somebody talk about a package integration, these are typically like packaged integration for SHL, which is an assessment vendor using Boomi or SAP Cloud Platform. Cloud integration, sorry. I have to be careful about the terminologies. And a slightly more genericized version of that is called standard integration template. Typically happens in Employee Central when you are trying to integrate with a benefits vendor, as an example, in North America. We have a generic template. Well, it's fairly specific, but what you then need to do is take that integration template, apply your own little flavor to it, and customize it for your vendor. Now, the third one here is called custom integration. This is the group that I used to work in previously, building custom integrations to different vendors and third parties. And this is a paid engagement where you let SuccessFactors integration team take care of building all the integrations. And fourth and final one is we have published APIs. You can look at the data dictionary. We can get into where exactly you look up the data dictionary and all that. But we expose all data that is possible. Well, I wouldn't say all that is possible, all that the product makes a decision on what data to expose and what not to, and whatever the different products decide to expose will be available via APIs, and those APIs will, the product also makes a decision whether or not you can insert into a particular object, or you can only query, or whether you can do an upsert, or you can merge data, different kinds of things. But it's ultimately the provider that makes the decision what is how and what is available via the APIs. Now, I just mentioned briefly packaged, standard, and custom integration. Use middleware. We can reside on-premise or in the cloud. What does the on-premise or in cloud mean? Essentially, we are talking about SAP PI, which will be on-premise, kind of a middleware gateway to third-party integrations, originating and ending in on SAP on-prem products. That is an ocean that I have not even approached, but if you guys are aware, I'm sure that you will know it can be a pretty complex thing. Now, mentioned briefly that we have any middleware can be used. I've given 3 examples here: SAP Cloud Platform, Dell Boomi, SAP PIPO, and we also have other vendors out there like MuleSoft, Cast Iron, At least these are the two ones that I last sort of heard of or dealt with. Now, naturally, when you are, whoops, I apologize. I skipped over one page. Okay. Naturally, when you're building an integration, as a vendor, you have to make a choice. How do I build the integration, right? So you have to not only know what the host system is, in this case SuccessFactors, and what the receiving system is. So the choice of the integration mechanism will largely depend upon what kind of data you want to get, what kind of ways you can extract data out of SuccessFactors, and on your side, on the partner side, you will have some limitation how you can consume the data. If you are able to consume only CSV files, then there is no point in talking about a real-time integration. But nevertheless, the point being that choice of which tool you want to use, you have to give it a little bit of a thought and see what will work best. But if I were to come blind into SuccessFactors and somebody were to show me the integration center, I say, yeah, that will be my choice, because I can do the typical things that I need to do with extracting data out of SuccessFactors, send it over. I know that I can output in CSV, I can output an XML, .dat file, and so on. And there's on the right-hand side under the integration center, I have this fourth bullet point, inbound CSV. There's still kind of a work in progress, which is up until recently, integration center was built for outbound integration. In other words, you can get data out of SuccessFactors. And the team is working on building the inbound interfaces, which means that in the foreseeable future, you don't even have to know what API you're using, as long as you know how to build the integration with the integration center. A lot of the technical aspects of the integration will be encapsulated within the integration center. So you only worry about the data and not the actual mechanism of how the data gets into SuccessFactors. Again, the two main things to consider when you're talking about the integration center. This slide says business user, but my experience with the integration center tells me it really depends upon the use case. In some case, you might actually need somebody like a data architect, somebody who understands data and data structures. And you can replace the data architect or the technical user for the business user. Middleware, typically, well, it's a lot more complex. You have to know not only how the middleware framework itself works, but also how the integration is supposed to work. So you're talking about not only technical capabilities, but also the business reason behind building the integration. And of course, if you're using middleware, you have a lot more flexibility. You can do both inbound and outbound. Now, I don't know why this thing that says 98 is hovering around the text. I can't move it. Okay, here are a couple of links here. I have given a link. The first one, I don't know why this 98 thing is hovering and whoops, sorry, my bad. Okay, Integration Center Use Guide. I've given the link here. It's also searchable on help.sap.com. You can simply type in Integration Center, and that will get you directly to the content. And of course, you can either view the Integration Center online or download a PDF version of it. Either will work. And then, of course, I've provided the links here for two kinds of APIs we talked about. One is the OData API, which is a newer one. It's being constantly enhanced. and the legacy SF API. Before I forget, there's a common question that I've heard from customers and partners alike. What is our stance on SF API? Is it going to be sunset? It's an important question to sort of remember and answer. And the answer is there is no plan to sunset SF API. As long as there are customers using SF API, SuccessFactors will continue to support it. Any kind of new features, you should expect that in OData API. Now, with that, I think I've sort of come to the end of the presentation. I still have about 10 minutes. Let me pause here, and I will take some questions if you have any.
Hi, Andy. This is Jenny McAdams.
Hey, Jenny.
How are you?
Doing well. Yourself?
Good, good. I unfortunately joined late. I had some issues where I lost the meeting details, so I came in about 20 minutes ago. But I wanted to ask a question about slide 18.
Okay.
The custom integrations, it looks like SuccessFactors Professional Services is available for a custom integration.
Right.
Are those resources available for an API integration or a standard integration template?
Well, you can. I mean, there's nothing preventing. We will happily take your money if you want to give us for a simple thing like a package integration, standard integration template. Now, custom integration, it is it can be pretty complex, and that has to be scoped out. If you need some details on whom to contact, I can certainly pass that information on to you. But essentially, the custom integration team gets into engagement, but there is no other easy way to build the integration, because there might be a lot of internal things that have to be done in order to make the integration work. Because there will be many things that are sort of not immediately apparent. Yes, in many cases, the custom integration team will use APIs to build the integrations, but there might be other aspects beyond just the APIs to build integrations.
This is Vivek here. Hey, Jenny. Have you had a chance to sign up for the JAM site itself? And oh, actually, you have.
Yeah, that's how you got the invitation, right?
Yeah. So have you taken a look at some of the documents we've posted under the content section? One particular section addresses the background check, screening, vendor integrations, and fair amount of detail. And I know, Andy, you and others have been going back and forth in terms of how to sort of set up the integration. But I think Andy has done a fantastic job in breaking things down. Perhaps, you could take a look at it and have your engineers take a look at it. And then let's do a quick touch base. And if you still think that you need help from the professional services team, then we're happy to sort of go down that path. But do take a look, and then we can reconvene here.
So Jenny, just for your benefit, real quick, I was thinking about you when I sort of wrote the documentation. I have split the inbound and the outbound integration. The outbound is purely dealing with the front end, right? Dealing with the integration center, how do you take the data out and all that. And for the inbound operation, those are all using OData APIs. So I have separated those two, put them in two separate documents. And that should it should help you out a great deal in simply talking to technical guys and see if they can figure out the OData API part of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Andy, this is Randy Hauk here.
Hey, Randy.
Hey.
Yeah, I saw your question. I saw your 3 questions. It'll take me some time to respond to that, partially because those have to be modeled. Yes, it's on my top of my mind. And I could not get to it yesterday because both Vivek and I were in an all-day meeting with another partner. So yes, it's on the top of my mind.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and one other question I have, it arose while you were giving your presentation here. When we look at the time-based filters for the integration center, but then you use integration center, you trigger it from intelligent services. It seems to me that those time-based filters are no longer available.
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct. The
Okay.
time-based filters are typically meant for large sets of data, right? When you typically when you're trying to produce a file, a very, very common use case, you're trying to create a CSV file for consumption by a payroll vendor or a benefits vendor. Those are typically file-based integration, and there you need to really think about time-based filters because you don't want to be sending all the data all the time. So you might want to only send the deltas since your last execution. Yes, for the intelligence services, it doesn't really apply. The time-based filters don't apply because the event is already triggered and that is the time. That's the
Yeah.
time and that's the event.
Right. So if one is really trying to get to some history though based on an event trigger, then it sounds like you'd have to go through probably the listener event and do a callback on a OData API to perhaps get the information you want versus using Integration Center for pulling what you need. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense.
Okay.
Well, there's just a little bit on that. What you can also do is when you do your callbacks, there are filters, time-based filters you can parameterize there.
Right.
And the other option could also be that you can trigger. So let's say an event notification happens, you can actually trigger via a call an actual integration center job. And that job itself could be separate from an intelligence services-based integration. It could be just a simple sort of extraction job out of integration center. And when you set up the template for that, you can have time-based filters there.
Right. Okay, but how would you call that then from intelligent services? Is that because you don't want to do the integration center integration because you're not going to be able to do that. How would you schedule that?
Right. So the way that would, I think, work, and Andy and others can jump in, theoretically, you would leverage intelligence services for the notification piece. So now you're aware that an event has happened. And then when you call upon that, whatever, like the trigger mechanism for that integration center job, it's really, actually, that's a good question. I believe that an inbound trigger is also applicable for integration center jobs. How that works, I'm not exactly sure.
Well,
We can look into it for you.
Vivek, let's just hold off on the inbound stuff. It's just still a work in progress. Right now, I know that it's been working or it's been tested out fairly well with CSVs. And
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, the purpose is not to send data back here. The purpose is for them to extract data still. I mean, so I think it's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, but there must be a mechanism for them to be able to call upon an integration center job, which is different from the intelligence services-based trigger mechanism.
that's right.
So there's definitely a way to do that. We'll just have to find out what that is.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I'll kick it about too. I hadn't known that.
Email regarding that, Randy?
I'm sorry.
I'll take it back to
Send an email. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. I'll say take it back to product guys and see what they have to say.
Yeah. No, I'll do that. Thanks.
We have about 3 more minutes left.
I guess just as a quick reminder, everybody, feel free to post questions on the Jam site. I think the intention is to sort of for us to be prepared with some answers for our regular weekly sessions. Of course, this is just a start, so there'll be a little bit of teething pains that we'll go through, but I hope that going forward, we can all sort of come prepared with some answers that you probably have questions to and you've posted. And then, of course, this forum is open for asking questions. We'll try and answer what we can, take some action items from here. So let's kind of keep this as a continuous dialogue. That's the intention behind these sessions. So, and I really think it was great to see you all on the call today. So thanks for joining also.
All right.
All right. So if there's not much else, Andy, I think we can wrap up today.
Yes.
And then we'll post the recording as well as the slides on the Jam site. And then we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.